I wanted to dedicate this video to my dear mother who recently passed and who told me something that will stay with me forever. And she said, don't take life so seriously, which I think is one of the most beautiful things that a mother can say to a child, because it liberates you and it doesn't enhance that conditioned structure that we have since we start learning about that false identity. I've decided that the tonality of my videos, I just want to say it how it is from my own perspective, because I think the most important thing is to be as direct as possible in this transmission, because the more intellectualized, the more layers of conditioning, the more we use language, the more we are emphasizing the intellect, whereas this truth of your nature, of who you are, is not an intellectual understanding. It's purely intuitive. And that's the beautiful thing, is that as you open yourself up to your true nature, which is just pure awareness, and I'll just talk about that in a second, you start to become far more intuitive, and life becomes easier, much easier actually, because you lose the need to control things, and you start to realize that that need to control things has been something that's been conditioned in you. When you were born, you didn't need to control anything. Your heart beats by itself, your breathing by itself. When you're hungry, you got food, if you were fortunate, obviously enough to have food as a child. But it's all by itself. It's automatic. You don't have to do anything. But it's only when you when that identity starts being created as a child, starting with your name, which is that foundation of your mental, conceptual identity, of the idea you have of who you are. There's so many beautiful human beings now that are talking about this. And one thing I noticed is that over time, I started to realize that everybody's talking about the same thing. If you're realizing that, because there's only one truth, and all the sages, all the awakened beings have different interpretations and different ways of talking about it, and there are different levels of recognition, but they all talk about the same thing. So let's just be very, very straightforward, because that's the most important thing, is to be as simple as possible, because that's how you really understand this, because it is very simple. And that's actually the problem, because you are already awake. If I were to ask you right now, are you aware? Are you alive? Do you need to think about it, or is that an intuitive, direct, immediate understanding? Hopefully it's an immediate and direct understanding. Hopefully you don't need to think about that. But maybe some people do. It just depends on the level of your identification with your mind, with the movement of your thought process, and how much you identify with that construct that you've created in your mind through your conditioning. Because once you just see that you're alive without any effort, because your existence is effortless and it is permanent. In fact, the only thing that is permanent is you. You are not a thought. You're not a concept. Reality is not a concept. Reality is not a thought. I had to hear this so many times to be able to really let it sink in, because I have come to find that the more, and in the beginning I was very prone towards intellectualizing it, right? I was overthinking it. The more you overthink it, the harder it is to really understand, because it's already here. And every time you're thinking, it takes you away from this present moment. This present moment is the only reality. There is no future or past. Those are just thoughts. Those are concepts. And those are concepts that are continuously changing. So let me ask you this. Over time, the idea we have of who we are changes. Would you agree with that? Like, for example, 10 years ago, were you exactly the same person, ego or identity as you are today? 5 years ago, maybe even a week ago, right? Because of your emotions or your identification emotions, you created a story around that, and that changed your perspective slightly on different things. Could happen. It's happened to me. I know it's happened to pretty much everybody I know. So if that identity, or if that idea you have of who you are is always changing, who is the real you? This is, I'm glad I was able to articulate in this way, because that's something that always blew my mind, right? Because if the idea you have of who you are is always changing, who's the real you? Now think about that in the perspective of entire humanity, of the 8 billion plus people that we think there are. We're always changing. Our ideas of who we are is always changing. Our ideas of other people are always changing. And here, think about this. Everybody's perspective of you is always changing. And we think people see us in a certain way, but every single human being sees us in a different way based upon their own conditioning and their own perspective. I hope that makes sense. Because the more you understand that, the more you start to understand what reality really is. And that is really just a quantum reality. It's just unlimited possibilities within a permanent structure. I mean, and that reality is you. You are this. And the more you listen to this, the more you understand that. And I mean, if what I'm saying doesn't resonate with you, that is perfectly fine. We are all on different levels of understanding. I'm not here to try to prove anything. All I want to do is just offer what has helped end a lot of most of my suffering in this life, and enhanced my understanding of how beautiful this existence really is, and how blissful this is, and what a learning lesson this life is, and how amazing it is to be free from the torment of the mind and the conditioning, which is relentless. And many times, I'm sure, and I hope, well, I wouldn't presume, I'm sure, but I hope, or that it makes sense in a way. And if it doesn't, if this doesn't resonate, again, as mentioned, once you realize that what reality really is beyond the intellect, beyond concepts, that is just here, it's always here, it's right now, that will free you, that will totally liberate you. And in a previous video, I was mentioning I didn't like offering techniques. And the reason I don't like offering techniques is because they do help, but it's like a bandage, right? A technique is temporary. It offers you a relief, but it's not permanent. The only thing that's permanent is your conscious awareness right now. And techniques within the structure of awareness offer a bandage to be able to just offer a little relief. And you will notice that this also took me a while to understand. Most of the pain I suffered came as a result of that perpetual machine of the mind-body identification. So in other words, I noticed that most of the struggle came from resistance. Resistance came as a result of my breathing had stopped. We all do that, right? We're resisting something, like you don't want something, so you're like, your breathing stops. And from the vast majority of this, that's unconscious, but our mind thinks there's something wrong because you're not breathing, and breathing is quintessential for our existence. But we're not conscious of that. So the mind interprets that as something is wrong, and it creates that flight or fight response. And many times that's why we feel anxiety. That's why we feel this. And I mean, no means, how should I say? I'm just talking about my own experience. This is not any advice. This is, you need to discover this for yourself, because the truth is always within you. The truth will never be found outside. And these things you will, by just being still and observing with detachment, you'll start to realize all of these little things, right? That you always take for granted, and the reality starts to become, that matrix starts to crumble, that false matrix, as some call it, right? Which is a beautiful world, the simulation, which some people are calling it. And it's amazing how many people are starting to realize this. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's our freedom. That's how we claim our power as eternal beings. We are all one. You will realize that the main impediment, the main block, the main, it's like Taoism talks about the flow of the river, right? Go with the flow. Because you are that flow, you are that river, you are that entire essence. Like, imagine a river is going down a mountain. If a big tree falls in front of the river, it's going to stop that flow. It's going to create a blockage. It's going to create an impediment. So the river is not going to flow as easily. That tree trunk falling on the river is equal to us trying to control our lives. It's us it's equal to us believing we are that character that has been fully invented, which is, you will hopefully find out, is a total illusion. It's just amazing, because the character that believes itself to be real, we are inventing this entire existence. And this, again, cannot be understood intellectually, but the more the character tries to get involved in the flow of this life, in the flow of this river, the more difficult the river will flow. Which talks about, and I wanted to discuss this, or mention this, because I listened to something amazing this morning. There's a beautiful human being, an enlightened being called Kyle Cease. He was a comedian, and he was talking about something that really hit me in my heart. And he said how he started, when he started acting, he had no acting school experience, and he said it was amazing. He did so well, and like his first, I believe it was a player movie, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and he said it was amazing that everything went so beautifully well, but then people encouraged him to take acting classes, and they said, that he was having too much fun, that he had to take it more seriously. And if you remember in the beginning of this video, I started off with saying the most important thing my mother taught me is, don't take life so seriously. And that was a beautiful thing to say, because that allows you to be in line with the constant flow of life. Because the minute you start taking it seriously, you're starting to go back into the belief that you are that conditioned person, and that immediately limits your entire and creates a very opaque reality around you, because now you're living within that structure of a very conceptual model. This is all based on language and thought, which is all conditioned. So the flow state is a state of no thinking. It's not contrived, it's not made up, it's just here right now. There is no effort required. So right now you are in the flow state, and that's the crazy thing, is that it's so effortless, it's so easy, but the minute we start to try to think about it, because we're so conditioned to do that, we immediately try to control it, right? It's remarkable when you just let go, when you just surrender. That's another thing, is hopefully I'll do a video on surrendering, because I never understood what that really meant until I really understood, until I was, to quote another very beautiful human being, a very enlightened being called Muji, he says, when you're out of moves, when you're out of moves, when you tried everything, and in this third dimension, this physical phenomenal reality, when you've tried everything and you're just, like everything crumbles around you, it's one of the greatest blessings in disguise. It's horrible at the time, but afterwards, if you have the maturity, if you have the ability to reflect and to take the lessons that you learned from that, and awaken as a result of that, that can be extremely useful, and it can open up possibilities and a new perspective in your life that you would never had before. I hope this video was of use to you. I really do. And let me know what you'd like me to talk about. Again, this is just for you. Thank you. Bless you.